All right, I think we are live. Hello and welcome to Higher Ed Live. It is Thursday, February 18th, 2016 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Marketing Live. I am your host, Amy Jorgensen. On today's live broadcast, we'll be talking about how to transform your email marketing from good to great for current students. Marketing Live is part of a Higher Ed Live network offering viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Live webcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues in the industry. All episodes of Marketing Live are free and accessible in the video archives at higheredlive.com and in iPod format on iTunes. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. I would like to welcome our guests for today. We have Natasha Wheaton, the Digital Marketing Manager, University Marketing at Temple University. Welcome.
Thank you.
Did I pronounce your last name right?
Wheaton,
I'm sorry.
No worries.
And then we have Kate O'Neill, content producer at University Marketing at Temple University. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, great to be here.
We also have Chase Carter, Director of Communications and Marketing for Oklahoma State University's Alumni Association. Welcome, Chase.
Hello, thank you.
So let's dive right into it. For those of you that are watching along, please do not hesitate to ask any questions using hashtag HigherEdLive on Twitter. I'll be doing my best to try and filter those questions as they come in. So let's start with the tools. What platforms are all of you using to email everyone?
So for our current student audience, we utilize Emma email marketing platform.
We are using iModules here at Oklahoma State, and I will preface all of my responses by saying that we send out our emails specifically to our student alumni members. We also send some to incoming freshmen and then to outgoing seniors, but most of our communications are sent to Student Alumni Association members through iModules.
Very cool. So were you guys involved in selecting what channel you use, or was it kind of IT said, here's what you got?
On our end, we definitely had a choice. Emma might not have been our #1 choice, but among sort of the lower tier, more low threshold email service providers, it seemed to be the one that was the most intuitive, easy for our admissions partners to use as well, and they had a full suite of customized templates already to use. If we had an unlimited budget, we might go for a larger tool like a Marketo or a Silverpop.
I was still new to the association when we selected iModules, but we've been with them now for 9 years. Have been very happy with the service. The university and the admissions department both use different services from iModules, so that can make things a little bit confusing. I wish we were under a more centralized hub, but it's pretty decentralized here at OSU. But we've been very happy with iModules and their suite of tools.
Cool. So with My Emma, are you able to say, like, so if there's a one student profile, can they say, like, I want to receive admissions information, I don't want to receive information about housing, I do want to receive information about food, or things like that?
They do have that capability. At the moment, we only utilize the platform for our central marketing team to send out newsletters throughout the week, and we have a separate instance of the account for admissions. So they're completely separate, but it does have the capability for contacts to have their own subscription preferences managed daily.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a great tool. Yeah.
So how do you guys manage the list of recipients of how many people, how many guys are you communicating, or how many students are you communicating to in these platforms?
From My Emma, it is our entire undergraduate and graduate student base. So it's, as you can imagine, pretty easy to manage that contact list as compared to different types of contact lists, maybe on like a B2C type of company. But for us, we're really just doing a refresh overnight through an open API that tells us who's a new student. And you can imagine that list is easy to manage throughout the semester, as there's not as much fluctuation with our contact list as other industries.
And it's about 30,000, right, Natasha?
Yeah, about 35.
35.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We are currently emailing to about 3,000 student members, and that number obviously varies from year to year, but it's been around 3,000. Obviously, over the summer, we're emailing to a different group, about 4,000 incoming freshmen, and then in the spring, we're emailing to about 4,000 outgoing seniors. So those vary, but in our larger email marketing scheme, we have about 170,000 addresses for OSU alumni that we manage. And it sounds like it's very similar to Temple. All of those are kept in our main offline database, which is Razor's Edge by Blackbaud, and those are updated every night via a refresh to iModules. And we can query based on whether they're a current student or a current member or where their hometown is, where they're from, different data variables like that we can use to manage and segment the communications.
So do you segment it within iModules, or do you segment it and then go into iModules and...
We segment it within iModules, and I know a lot of different clients do it differently. Some do the queries in their offline database and then pull the list and just upload that directly to iModules. For us, it's a lot easier because we are uploading a majority of every constituent's data, whether it's graduation year or zip code, which we use for the location-based segments. We upload all that information to iModules, and so using their very simple query tool, we're able to do all that relatively quickly without having to request a list from our IT department and wait for that to come back and then use that list specifically. So we do most of the list building within iModules.
Very cool. So when it comes to building templates and making sure that they're engaging and you're not just having plain text, what kind of tips do you guys have for that? Have you used just the templates that were in the email systems, or are you creating your own?
So for our student newsletter that was launched this past fall, it's called Nutshell, and like I said, it goes to all current students. We develop a template that is outside of the tool that we update manually. I use Dreamweaver, but you could hand code it and then plug it into the tool. And in terms of how we keep that layout engaging, from sort of like a back-end standpoint, obviously mobile-friendly, responsive template, clean. We keep our newsletter extremely clean, white background. We did some focus groups with students, and they reinforced the fact that simplicity makes it easier on them to read. And then Kate, I'll let Kate speak to kind of keeping it engaging in terms of the types of assets we use within that template.
So we actually work with designers to help us gather assets. At the beginning, I was doing that part by myself, but I am a content producer, but more of a writer. So now we do all kinds of things. We use GIFs. We use, we try to be, funny and use the kind of images that students are liking and engaging with elsewhere. So, recently we did a story about how, tips for writing a resume, and in there was a joke about, a squirrel stealing a piece of pizza. So we used a big, meme of a squirrel, and it said, "I dare you" across it. So, we try to keep them interesting. We don't use a lot of stock photography. We don't even use a lot of the photography that our university photographers are gathering. We have a pretty separate thing that we do, different from anything else communication-wise coming out of our office.
So like all the design stuff that you do is, why don't you use shared content?
Because we want to, I think the part of the reason that Nutshell, the email for students, is so successful is that we had an email that went to students, faculty, and staff, and it just had a terrible open rate among students. Mm-hmm. So we peeled this off, and I think the reason it's so successful, it has a 45% open rate, is because it is really just for students. And every week when I create it, that's what I'm thinking. What do they think is funny? What is going to be engaging to them? And the things, most of what we do in terms of marketing and communications, a lot of it's for alumni, a lot of it's for people who are a different age, and we just want this to engage students. So that's what we're thinking about in terms of assets and content.
I applaud you guys for having a separate student-specific newsletter. Oklahoma State does not do that. I think we send out 2 or 3 a week, but it is to the entire base of faculty, staff, and students. So I think that's great that you've separated it out. We just this past January, launched a new version of our student newsletter. It is mobile-friendly. It has a white background, so all those same ideas in place. Trying to make it as short and sweet as possible. We kind of rely more now on our student interns that are in our office for ideas on content, because obviously they're the same age of our recipients. So we're looking to them to provide some ideas on what they might like to see in the e-newsletter. We've been using a lot of student-submitted photography for our e-newsletter. One of them, we have a program, a Tradition Keepers program, where students complete traditions throughout their time at OSU and kind of level up. It's kind of a gamification system. And most of the traditions are done by submitting a photo of the student doing that tradition, and we have access to all those photos. So to promote the program, we've been using the actual photos that the students are submitting through an app. And that's gotten a lot of good feedback and is obviously very original and very engaging. It's not any type of stock photography that they might normally see coming from the university. So that's worked really well for us. We always try to use big call-out buttons whenever we're having them make some sort of, take some sort of action, whether it's registering for an event or uploading an application or something like that. We have a very similar button that we use, and we just change the text on and make sure that that's very large and prominent so that it's easy to see in the emails, and that's worked well too.
Awesome. Nice. I love the idea of leveling up.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Like, I'm leveling up as a student.
Exactly.
That's great. We actually just ran a test on call to actions and did some testing on size and color of our buttons and our call to actions in general versus in text links versus button links, and saw really fantastic results for sort of like a shade of blue button that students were really drawn to. So that's something we use as well.
So you find buttons are far more effective in getting them to work with the call to action as opposed to just text links?
That's what, our testing has showed us, yes. And focus groups as well, I believe that came up.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when we did the A/B testing with the buttons, we did it for faculty and staff, and we did it for students. And with faculty and staff, they didn't click more with the buttons, but students did by, I think, 38%, right?
Yeah.
So it definitely made a big difference.
And we've seen similar results. A lot of older alumni prefer the links in the text versus having an actual button in the email. So.
Yeah, and we didn't even see a preference necessarily, just that it was not a driver for them. It was the same. So it's really interesting.
Very cool. So going back to, like, what about, like, some of the content? Do you allow folks to unsubscribe for your messages? Is that something we should include? Should we not include it? Is that something that, does that work with? So our students are using Gmail at the University of Virginia. And one of the things that worries me is, like, how do we make sure we're not kept in spam filters? So making sure that they have the ability to unsubscribe, will that keep us out of the spam filters, or is that going to put us in there because it says unsubscribe? Like, how do you manage some of that?
So having an unsubscribe link in your newsletter, based on the research that I've done, doesn't put you in spam folders. It's more about your past deliverability reputation. For the current student audience, again, the contact management, database management side of things is easier with this audience, and this subscription management part of it is we do offer them an unsubscribe link because of the nature of the newsletter. It comes once a week. It's news. If we have sort of like critical university announcements, we do not include an unsubscribe link. And then in terms of staying in inboxes and not going into spam folders, just ensuring that all of Emma's IP addresses are whitelisted with our computer services team.
Awesome.
We include an unsubscribe link only from the standpoint of iModules and their operations has to include one because of the Canned Spam Act, and so we really didn't even have an option. So we've had one ever since we launched with them 9 years ago. Our university, I know specifically, used to do all of their email sending internally up until about a year ago, and for the life of me, I'm blanking on the service that they're using now. It is an outside service, so before they did not have an unsubscribe link versus now they do, and I know they were very concerned about that and the repercussions of allowing students or faculty or staff. And from what I've heard, they have not seen many instances at all of people unsubscribing, and even if they did, I think there's still an ability to email kind of critical emergency messages to them using a different service, so we still are able to contact them that way. But if the students or the faculty aren't necessarily interested in reading that content, then they basically decided that there's no real hindrance to not allowing them to unsubscribe, so they go ahead and do that as well. We see relatively few unsubscribes from our student members. Obviously, they're more invested in us because they have paid a membership fee, and so they're looking for communications from us. So I think that's helped us keep our unsubscribe rate low. And hopefully, I'd like to say that it's the good content that we're sending out to them as well. They want to get it. So, but we have unsubscribe links in ours too. As far as spam. I know iModules works with a lot of the major clients to make sure that our sender rating is good, and if it drops too low, then they work with us specifically. But that hasn't happened to us. But I know they've worked with some other clients before. We whitelist IPs when we can. We send generally from the same email address every time. We do kind of change up the from name, and I think that's something we'll talk about later on. But we generally try to send from the same email address every time.
Excellent. So, what kind of messaging are you guys including? You talked a little bit about funny content and personalized, or what was it, the content that's going to be, are you generating each of this content, or how are you putting all this together? What are you sending out to students? Is it event-based? Is it news-based? Is it just cool factoids?
I mean, for us, it's really all of the above. The point of the newsletter is to create a relationship with students, and we want that relationship to be one that continues after they graduate and are alumni. So the first thing we do is try to engage. So we try to think of content that they want to read. We do listicles. We do. Listicle? It's basically an article in the form of a list. Basically, anything on BuzzFeed is a listicle. So it'll be like, 7 ways, 7 tips for writing a resume, that kind of thing. Instead of an article, we make it a list, easy to read. And again, tone is so important. When we did the focus groups with students, they talked a lot about the nutshell voice, and I think that that's a big part of the success, both, what is in the content and how it's presented to them. We give them, we do events. We have a video series that we created for the email. It's called Owl Hacks. The owl is our mascot, and it teaches them little hacks, things they can do in their dorm room, like how to make a cake in a mug in a microwave, or how to get ready for an interview if you don't have an iron, like to iron your shirt. So things like that. We have a recurring food truck review that we do where we review different food trucks. We try to give them information that's helpful, like how to fill out a FAFSA, tips for writing a resume. But then we also use the email that when we have things we really want to communicate to them, important messaging, things that reflect our strategic priorities. So, when Temple went up in the U.S. News rankings, we did a special email, and it had, a 50-something open rate. We just had a 24-hour giving campaign on campus, and we use that. We use Nutshell to communicate that to students. So it works on a lot of different levels, and the content kind of reflects that. I don't know, Amy, if there's a way to give people my email address so they can contact me if they want me to send them examples of the email, because I think the best way to understand it is really to see it. We were at a conference recently, and I had been doing research trying to find out about other universities who might have a similar student email and couldn't really find anything. So if people want to contact me, I'd be happy to share it with them.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to send any links to me, I'll definitely post it on the webpage too, so that way they can access all that.
Cool.
Content for us is a lot more programming and event specific because of the purpose of the membership. So we do a lot of events. Just 2 days ago, we did our first online virtual networking event with alumni and students, and so we sent out several emails, promoting that. We do T-shirt giveaways throughout the year, different contests, and so a lot of the emails focus on that. Our e-newsletter, we try to include some original content. They're getting a lot of career tips from career services and a lot of on-campus information from university communications. So we try to branch out and do some different things to provide some either tips or things from alumni that they might not necessarily get anywhere else. We try to provide that type of content in our e-newsletter, so that they're seeing a different perspective of your life as a cowboy is not just about the 4 years that you're going to be here on campus. It's about an entire lifetime experience, and so we're kind of uniquely positioned to provide that information. So that's some of the content that we tried to include as well.
So what do you do if you have to put out really boring content? So for example, it's like you need to, do this sexual harassment training, prevention training. You need to fill out this student outcomes report. You need to know about this new, alcohol. Like, how do you, like, of course you're always going to have the fun content and the events and things that they're going to be interested in, but how do you make that kind of boring stuff a little bit more appealing and making sure that they're completing the call to action or that they're actually reading it?
We make it funny. I just make it funny. I mean, so even if it's a really boring thing like, fill out your student, the course feedback forms, like things they have to do before they leave the dorms at the end of the semester. We use, engaging graphics, and then just the writing itself is funny. You can kind of make fun of it, if it is something really boring, or, with the course feedback forms, we both tried to make it funny and kind of acknowledge the fact that it's this pain to do and tell them how they benefit. But tone, I kind of can't underestimate the way in which I think tone is really important for millennials. They want stuff that has some kind of emotional impact on them, and one of the things that I think we were doing that wasn't working was telling them what we wanted them to know in our voice instead of telling them what they want to know about in their voice.
Can you give an example of how the tone changed?
I mean, before it was basically almost like news reporting, just pretty straightforward, that kind of stuff. So when we did the FAFSA tips, like how to fill out your FAFSA, the headline of it was the F word, and the first line of the blurb were, and the way that we put, the graphic that was, it made it kind of look like a swear. So it was like the letter F and then the @ sign for the A. So it kind of looked like a swear, and that was a GIF. And, and the like, I'll just read you the first couple lines. So it was called the F word, and then it was like, stupid FAFSA, I hate you FAFSA, don't make me FAFSA, may I please have some money FAFSA? And then it went into, so that's kind of, note that those F's don't stand for flesh eating and fatal, we make it funny, and I think that's why they continue to open and read and engage with it, even when it's something as, FAFSA is probably one of the most boring things in the world, but I think that's how we get them to engage with it. And that had really high engagement, that article.
Excellent. So how often are you emailing students? Like, how often are they receiving some of these messages? I mean, of course, there's important things that we have to send out, that, the FAFSA thing, that, like, this is time sensitive, but how often are you sending out your newsletters?
We send out Nutshell once a week. Every Monday. Actually, we're testing Sunday night after the focus groups, and that time seems to be working well. But we do it once a week, except for, we don't send over break. And then we do have special announcements. For example, at the last minute, game day, the ESPN show came to Temple, so we did a special one for that. We did a special one when we went up in the rankings. Things like that we'll sort of do. And we also have other outlets in which, that we use to communicate with students, but we will do a special edition sometimes if there's something important. And because we do it weekly with things like FAFSA, we can just include it in the weekly one instead of doing a special one.
Yeah, and to chime in about student communications in general at universities, obviously there's a lot of decentralization, and students are getting hit with messaging from many different angles, including their own schools and colleges and majors from their own professors, and rogue databases. But we really keep Nutshell distinct with a from name of Nutshell Pipe Temple University. So it's clear that it has its own brand, and that's kind of how we ensure that it will continue to be read.
And we also, when we were first starting, and we continue to promote it on Twitter, so we'll link to an article on, the central Twitter account and say, it's in your inbox, and we promote it in other ways, to get people, because students are inundated with email, to get them to open it initially.
So are the posts that you have, so like the F word post, I'm assuming that there's like a little blurb about it in the email, and then you go to a blog page or something that has all the content?
Yep, so for some of them, they're self-contained blurb. And that's another thing we do that I think is really important, which is to keep the content in the email itself short. I mean, they're short blurbs, never more than a short paragraph.
Excellent. So what about you, Chase? How often are you emailing students?
We are emailing students currently once a month for our e-newsletter, which is down from every other week. Last semester, we experimented with a biweekly e-newsletter in an attempt to kind of centralize the communication. So we were trying to put more information into that versus sending one-off event invitations, which we did a lot more of before. And we found that we weren't getting as good participation rates. So we've switched back, and we're doing the e-newsletter now once a month. And then continuing on, generally we do probably 2 or 3 emails per event that we do. So I would say that any student member could probably get anywhere from, some weeks there's probably none, but chances are they probably get 1 or 2 emails from us a week. And we still keep a pretty high open rate. Normally it's in the 40s with our student members, so I think that's pretty good. Content-wise, we also promote, especially now with our student newsletter, we have a mobile app. Actually 2 mobile apps, for one for alumni, one for anybody, so students and alumni can have it, and then we have a student-specific one tied to that traditions program, and we've started sending out push notifications to those students as well who have it whenever we send out what we call student orange bites, which is the e-newsletter to let them know, hey, it's in your inbox, go check it out for these topics right now. Kind of along the lines of naming, our main alumni e-newsletter is also called Orange Bites, and so we intentionally branded the student one with the same name, just with student in front of it, so that they can make that connection that this is kind of my insider track to OSU, this communication, and I'm going to get it as long as I keep my membership after I graduate. So we've used that to kind of help brand it as well.
So I'm going along with the funny stuff that Kate was talking about. You need to have like your president chomping onto a Cheeto, or your dean chomping into a giant orange, and like have a whole bunch of orange food and be like orange bites, and
Exactly, yeah. We actually just finished a photo shoot with Pistol Pete, our mascot, and it was for a new e-statement campaign for our Student Alumni Association members to get them to renew. And they all have large pictures at the very top of the email, and they're all with Pistol Pete. I believe the one that they get the day that their membership lapses, it just says crushed really big, and it's Pistol Pete's boot stomping on an orange that's kind of exploding in the picture. So they're all very short and very impactful. We kind of tested the limits with our administration and got a few of them turned down because of how kind of crazy idea they were. But we have Pete doing, what's up? Why haven't you renewed? There's one with Pete holding an orange out in front of him. Orange, you going to renew? So the same lines, to try to make the tone very fun and very funny, and to try to get them to take an action off of it.
The more puns, the better. Like, I'm all about the puns. So back to some of the content, how often, so where's kind of the limit with being funny? So I work for a career center developing a whole bunch of content. Can I say that, looking for a job sucks? Can I say that, or is that like, do I not want to, like, I don't want to swear? Like, how do I?
I mean, we don't swear, but we push it, and I mean, I do think that there's 2 aspects of it. One is being, funny and using their voice, and there's things that we can't touch; they're taboo. But we can say, looking for a job is the hardest thing you're gonna do. It's harder than waking up at 7 a.m. on a Monday morning. And you just kind of make it funny and acknowledge the things that everybody's thinking, and so then they identify with it. And instead of giving them this sort of instructive, pedantic, boring list of things, make it so that it's funny and engaging while being instructive. The other thing I was thinking about while you were talking, Chase, is that we also really try to protect our content. It's so hard at a university. Now that this email is going out and is really, really successful, everybody wants to be in it, and we say no a lot. And the reason we do that is because the minute we start, again, like pushing the content that we want them to have instead of giving them the content they want, they will stop reading. Mm-hmm. But take it as you can without being. I don't even think we've even come close, and I don't think you have to kind of achieve that tone and voice and that sense of fun and being funny. I don't think you have to even come close to that.
So, have you guys done anything to personalize or develop targeted messages towards certain audiences? So, for example, students that are interested in gardening, like so they get certain kind of messaging about gardening, or do you rely on, different organizations that will potentially have that kind of content?
I think at Temple, there's so many groups emailing students with their specialized content. So we really, we will, we'll post events like, the College of Education is having this kind of event, or, but we just send one email to all students, and we try to make the content in it really diverse. So something about football, something, so that it's not speaking to any one student. I think we're talking about at the end of the year doing an email just for seniors, but generally it is the student newsletter that goes to all students.
Yeah, and I want to chime in about sort of like dynamic content is something that's a little bit more blue sky for us right now in terms of resources. In order to produce content that's highly personalized to meet the needs of all of the affiliations at our university, it requires a lot of resources and a lot of legwork. We understand the importance of personalization and tracked our success of our newsletter from years ago and realized that the first step was separating students from faculty and staff. And I think we're going to continue moving and personalizing, but at the moment I think resources is definitely a restriction.
We are also limited here just from a data standpoint of what we get information on students. Our Alumni Association is a separate 501c3 nonprofit, so at the moment we don't get a lot of student data other than what our student members provide us. So generally that isn't anything more than their name and their hometown address and their email address. We don't necessarily get their major. Sometimes we don't even know when they're graduating, which is a problem. But most of the segmenting that we've done right now for students is based on where they are at in that student life cycle. Are they incoming freshmen? Are they new freshmen on campus? Are they juniors and about to transition into senior year? Are they seniors who need to apply for our senior awards? Or are they recent graduates? So that's generally how we segment right now. I would love to be able to segment based on even what college they're in or what campus organizations they're in. We just aren't able to do that currently.
And to be honest, we're doing some of that at the University of Virginia, and it's hard. It's really hard to be able to make sure. So one student might receive an email based on what college she's in. It may be based on what industry she indicated she was interested in getting job information on. So there's potential jobs about that industry. There's potential events that are associated with that industry, and so if she chooses perhaps 2 industries that she's interested in, she could be receiving 4 emails a week just based on that. So it's hard to do some of the personalization without over inundating them with so much information. But it's one of the things that they say they all want. So it's kind of a challenge to pull it together the right way. So this is refreshing to hear. It's not just us that are struggling with some of those. So one of the biggest challenges that I have with developing content, especially for emails, is making sure that it's clear and concise. So brief is a difficult word. I have found it's a word I don't like to use often, because if you say brief, it implies that you're losing information and you're not putting everything in there. But concise implies that it's just direct and to the point. So how do y'all do that? How do you work with folks to make sure that it is clear and concise? I would love tips.
Well, for Nutshell, I create the content. So I'll get, people will send me, the email about their event, and it's, paragraphs and paragraphs long, and then I just cull from that something and make it really short. If it is going to be longer, I link out. But even then, when we link out, nothing's more than 500 words. It can't be. And again, bullets and lists and things like that seem to work better with students than long articles. So, and with, our partners on campus, if they send us something about an event and it's really long-winded but has a lot of details, I'll tell them that, we really need them to create a website or a place that I can link to, because I just can't put it all in the email.
Completely agree. We try to use as catchy of a title as possible for our stories in our e-newsletter, and then if we do need to explain it, it's 1-2 sentences max, and then it has to link somewhere. Even if there's not much else information to give, we still want to give them a place to go. If it's one of our programs, say it's about class rings, for example, we try to make sure that every story and every event in the e-newsletter has a link so that they can find out more information, which either links to our website or some other campus partner's website. But it has to be short.
So along with that, how do you come up with subject lines for them to open the email in the first place? And what are some popular examples that you've had?
Well, for the one about FAFSA, the subject line was just curses, and then we used the pre-header, and that had a huge open rate, and I'm positive it's because it said curses. And then we used the pre-header to kind of contextualize what's in the email. So it said curses, and then I think it said, nah, FAFSA is not a swear word, or something like that. We'll use song lyrics, which, I mean, again, we try to keep them really, really catchy. There's a really popular song called Going Up on a Tuesday, and when we sent out our U.S. News report, we sent it on a Wednesday, and the subject was Going Up on a Wednesday. You know, we just try to be clever, think about what they're seeing and hearing and thinking, and use that. We just used a Beyonce lyric.
And we definitely, Kate touched on this, we use the pre-header to contextualize the short subject line, and I can't stress enough how important your pre-header space is. It's the couple lines of text in the inbox or on mobile that's below the subject line. So if you make keep your subject line short, and I know it's probably beating a dead horse, but you really need to keep it short. Under 30 characters is really great, and then use that pre-header space to contextualize your subject line.
Completely agree with the pre-header. We use that to try to give more of a preview into what's in the email to try to get them to open it. Some of our best open rates, I know there's a lot of debate over this, has included a name token. So the highest open rates we've ever received, which are in the 70s and 80s, is our first email that we ever send to incoming freshmen about new student orientation from the Student Alumni Association. And the header is, or the subject line is just, "Can't wait to meet you, Amy." And that's the one that gets the highest open rates of all of the ones we send. So I think students kind of in their own vain way like reading their name and seeing their own things in the email, and so that's always proven to do really well for us.
That's smart. I mean, that's what they taught us at Disney, is use their name as often as possible. Yeah. So I'd be like, how do they know all this? Very cool. So what are some of the ways, and we talked about this a little bit, that you've made sure that your content is dynamic and interesting for the viewers? You've talked about making it funny, you've talked about some GIFs, you've talked about videos. What are some other ideas that you have?
It's difficult, especially for us. We don't have as large of a team as university communications, university marketing does. So my undergraduate degree is in broadcasting, and so we try to do videos whenever possible. A lot of times we will put that fun and interesting content out on our social media, and we'll link to that through the email. So that kind of kills two birds with one stone. We're getting fun and engaging content. They're seeing it in the email, and then hopefully they're also liking our Facebook page at the same time. So we drive a lot of content out that way. In my limited experience, I have tried to do some GIFs created ourselves internally. We have a slogan at Oklahoma State, and it's "Go Pokes," and you put your guns up like this. And so I created a moving GIF one time that was a hand, and the hand kind of rocked back and forth, and that was really well received. But for us, it's kind of a resources issue. We're just trying to do the most with the least that we have, and make it as fun as we can. It sounds like the folks at Temple are beating us out of the water in terms of the cool things that they're putting in their emails.
Oh,
hey, I'm having trouble even getting pictures in my email sometimes, so don't feel bad at all. We got a branded header this year. That was a big deal. So.
Yeah, in our office, we spend a lot of time brainstorming, and by a lot of time, not even that much time, just taking 15 minutes or 20 minutes every week to kind of just sit down, and Kate spearheads that, and just brainstorming. And two examples that I can think of off the top of my head, which by no means you're limited, the brainstorming is the most important takeaway there. get your team together and you can come up with a lot of great things. But two things we've done. One is an instantly Instagrammable photo that we'll add to our emails, where we'll give brief instructions on how to take a square photo from the email and share it out on their own Instagram. And it'll be, nice photography from around campus, something of interest. I think a square image of the Philadelphia skyline was probably the most successful for that. And then another idea is utilizing GIFs within, instead of doing a still frame of a video, use a GIF behind a play button, if that's making sense, in your email to give the illusion that the video is playing. We've seen really great click-through rates on those types of GIFs.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So we talked about so many great ideas, and I am so excited about so much of this. And so teach us about some of the things that you have tried and they have not worked. So that way we don't go down that channel. Is there anything you tried and you're like, that was a bust, we shouldn't do that again? And what have you learned? And
well, we do a lot of A/B testing. We did some focus groups, and more than having like a big bust, we're just realizing how to do things better. So we sort of decided, okay, we're going to send the email first thing Monday morning because I think that's an email marketing best practice. And then we did a focus group with students, and they said, actually, we'd rather get it Sunday night while we're just kind of home and studying and getting ready for the week. Monday's too busy. And so we did an A/B test of it, and that worked. Same thing with buttons. We were doing in-text links. Started doing buttons, and that they're clicking through much more with those.
I would agree. I can't say that there's anything really that I've noticed email-wise that had just fallen flat. So we're definitely just trying to do things better. From my recent experience, I can tell you that we had limited success in trying to consolidate everything into an e-newsletter. The students, while they were opening it, were just not making it through the entire email. And so we're still searching for ways. We've debated, should we have some sort of contest where we hide a little Pistol Pete face in the email, and for the 5 first people who find it and click on it, they get a gift card. But then we're hopefully driving more traffic to the email and getting people to read it. But standalone emails for us has worked the best, which is what we've returned to in terms of pushing out specific programming and events and getting students to take actions off of those.
One thing I did want to say, it may be not a complete bust, but something we've learned along the way from our previous newsletter and working with our faculty staff newsletter is layout. In terms of the template that you use, you don't want to shoehorn your template and say our content has to fit into these certain patterns. You should create a template that's extremely flexible, that your content producer creates the content, and then you find a way to lay it out in an appropriate way so that it's following best practices, responsive, and a clean layout. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I love that. So you guys have given me a ton of great ideas. I want to thank you so much for all of your help. Do you have any additional last tips before we go?
I would just say try anything. I think that marketing specifically to students is really, really important. And then when you were talking about successes and failures, some of the things that have been so surprising to us are things that we thought like, well, they probably won't want a story about facilities and new buildings, and then they all loved it. So I just think try anything.
I would agree. The more you can personalize it, the better. I didn't mention earlier, and this probably isn't as big of an issue for universities. For us, we're always making sure that our database is, up to date. Students move a lot during the 4 or 5 years that they're here on campus. So, in as many emails as we can, we try to include a little section that kind of describes their record and what their current address is, and that's all brought in via tokens from our database. And we get a tremendous response from alumni and students. They don't want to see that their address is wrong or that their phone number is wrong. They change it immediately. So we've always gotten good results from putting that type of information in the emails and getting them to update off of that.
Awesome. And before we go, what are we looking at for open rates and click-through rates? What is just a general average? Because y'all are throwing out numbers like 50 and 80%, and I'm going, holy snap, I'm stoked that I got 25% on some of these emails.
So our open rate with our publication that we've been speaking of, that we previously sent to students, faculty, and staff, was averaging about 22%. Over the course of a semester, it dropped to about 18%. So we were seeing a downward sloping line, which we do not want to see again. Since we've revamped and started segmenting, we're seeing about a 44% average open rate for our student newsletter. And I would strive to get there. Students, they're engaged with the university. I mean, they're there every day. It's very possible. And our faculty and staff, I know that's not the subject, but we see about a 25% average open rate there. And click-through rates, that's not necessarily our goal with Nutshell. So we see a little bit of a lower than average rate, somewhere between 8 and 11%. But again, we want students to skim through it. We want them to read and engage with the content as per necessary when we ask them to click through. So.
Ours is very similar. For a membership-based organization, we generally see between 40 and 50% open rates for students. It's interesting that people, I hear people say that students aren't reading their emails, and yet that is about 10% higher than our alumni member e-newsletter. So, they're at least opening it, and then it's up to us to provide the content that they want to engage with. Click-through rates, they're a little bit lower than what Temple's at. I think they're normally around 5%, which again for us is not the biggest part unless it is driving event registration. So in that regards, we're obviously trying to get them to register. So for us, the event participation and the program participation is a little bit more important than the click-through rate, for example.
Rock on. Yeah, our general open rates, like just for emails and stuff like that, is typically around 25%. And most of it is event-based, and we're looking at around a 17 to 20% click-through rate because we have a lot of things you have to register for. But our personalized email content, like it's a lot better. It's like, okay, I actually want to know about jobs in this industry or whatever. But yeah, you got me jealous about the averaging of the 40% all the time. Snap.
It's really, really impressive, and we're really excited about it. And it's that metric where over the course of the fall, that number was stagnant. It stayed about a straight line around 44% open rate all through the semester versus how it used to go from 22% to 18% approximately. Which is just an ugly graph, and we do not ever want to see it again. So,
I've been there. Well, I would like to thank you all so much for joining us today. You're all absolutely amazing, and I've learned so much. And thank you always to our program sponsor, M. Stoner, and thank you for everyone who's tuned in today. Make sure to check out more shows from Higher Ed Pros on higheredlive.com. Thanks, and see you next time.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.